Now, as I said, I'm sorry, there were memory space troubles. Um, as I said, this reviewer in a way asks me to be over speculative, although other editors had complaints about the paper being too speculative. He says, if I am right, then the payoff matrix proposed by the author should just work once, but cannot tell us anything about the evolution and maintenance of homosexuality in the long run. My reply, yes, I do not wish to claim more and be so pretentious as to play a prophet here about homosexuality and the evolution of it in the long run, or even in the future. I would like to be, after all, an empirical scientist. All I am saying is that this does work once, that is in a population where there is some evidence that homosexuality develops via some maternally inherited crazy about men gene, that is in such a population as it stands and has developed now. My dilemma arises under the conditions that I've specified. It may of course be resolved if it should turn out that the causal constellation embraced by Camperio-Ciani and the reviewer is wrong, just as it has turned out to be wrong that there is a common cause for smoking and lung cancer, which was Fisher's hypothesis. In that case, it has simply turned out that one thing of the two causes the other. There is no third common cause, and just this could turn out to be true in the homosexuality case. We just have evidence that there is such a crazy about men gene in some human populations, and in these populations this dilemma arises, and maybe in these populations a different explanation of homosexual behavior is valid. I'm not claiming to explain the evolution and maintenance of homosexuality in the long run. Just what is currently observed. Then the reviewer says, to be more precise, thank you, to be more precise, let's say that P of C2 given S1 equals X and P of C2 given S2 equals Y. The assumption, the thing is in the box, you may need more time to get that. The assumptions of the model tell us that Y is greater than X. In other words, I substituted greater than by a round bracket. If it just appears once and there is no closing or opening bracket, it's the greater or less than sign. The assumptions of the model tell us that Y is greater than X. In other words, the individuals who bear the genetic factors S2 have a greater probability to become homosexual. Those that have the... If we note F1 and F2 equals 1 minus F1 respectively, if we note, this is the language of that reviewer, if we say that F1 and F2 equals 1 minus F1 respectively are the frequencies of genetic factor S1 and S2 in the population, then we have, accordingly to Bayes' theorem, according to Bayes' theorem, he means P of S2 given C2 equals Y times F2 divided by X times F1 plus Y times F2, which is not a constant. My reply, I could only reply to this. The same argument can be formulated against his view that the other thing is a constant. To be more precise, let's say that P of S2, the other way around, S2 given C1 equals X and P of S2 given C2 equals Y. The empirical results and hypothetical assumptions about the existence of a crazy about men gene tell us that Y is greater than X. In other words, the individuals who become homosexual have a greater probability to bear the genetic crazy about men gene factor. If we let F1 and F2 equals 1 minus F1 respectively denote the frequency of heterosexuals and homosexuals in the population, then we have, according to Bayes' theorem, P of C2 given S1 equals Y times F2 divided by X times F1 plus Y times F2, which is not a constant. What about the time? Still some left. The reviewer speaks again. Indeed, in the author's words, the goal or hope of the individuals is to have a family larger than average. So frequency of genetic factors will change. If the author does not take it into account, I don't think his model can tell us anything about the evolution and maintenance of homosexuality. Again, my reply, I did not claim that it did tell us anything about the evolution and maintenance of homosexuality. All I intended to show is that some model, that is Camperio-Ciani's, which indeed intends to show us something about the evolution and maintenance of homosexuality, gives rise to a dilemma, which may be a hint that something is wrong with the explanation, or at least that something has been left unexplained, or that there is some ignorance about some factors. The crazy about Mengin has not been identified, for example. One other substantial point of my paper is to make clear that, just as other bad types of human behavior such as xenophobia, misogyny, rape, etc., homophobia, a trait so much present in many populations still today, after the others have started to have been at least somewhat overcome, this other bad type of human behavior must have a root in prehistoric human populations where it did make sense. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever. Many of the other explanations of homosexuality that I presented in the paper, which do seem to explain the trait itself, homosexual behavior, do not seem to explain the costly hatred of it, still rooted, according to recent surveys, in almost 50% of Homo sapiens in certain areas of the world. If we understand where some type of hatred comes from, we have a better basis to deal with it. That's a political aspect of the paper. This is especially interesting. Science does create political aspects. This is especially interesting for evolutionary psychology and or the evolution of culture.